Regional Director for Entrepreneurship and Workforce Development at Amideast. But I did not take a very linear career path to get to where I am now. I studied Middle Eastern Studies at undergraduate and did a master's degree in international relations and diplomacy in London. And the idea I had was that I would go work for the UN after grad school. But after grad school, I needed to earn some money because I had student loans I needed to pay. So I took an entry-level job with an investment bank as a credit analyst, and I hated it. I mean, I really hated it. I did it for 3 years, and I complained about my job all the time until my friends were like, we cannot stand you anymore. You have got, for our sakes, to get a new job. Like, just please do something else. And I did. I quit my job. I trained as a chef, and it was a big change, but I worked as a private chef for about a year. And then I started a hotel and restaurant in the Medina of Fez in Morocco. And after about 10 years, I passed the management of my business to my Moroccan team. And that freed me up to actually pursue my original career goal of working in international development. And here I am. For many years, long after I started my business, I never considered myself an entrepreneur. So like back when I was 28, when I started my business, when I thought of an entrepreneur, I thought of someone who had this like really new and innovative idea, probably something that used cutting edge technology, someone who was going out and pitching to investors, and they had a pitch deck and it was really professional. Maybe they were going through incubation. And at that point, I didn't even know what an incubator was. They were doing feasibility studies, and all of that seemed really foreign to me. It didn't seem to have anything, wasn't related at all to what I felt I was doing. I was simply trying to solve a problem.
And what was that problem, if you can share with us?
Sure. So I had gone to Fez as a tourist, with a background in Middle Eastern studies. I loved traveling in North Africa and the Middle East. And so I went to Fez on holiday, and I was really frustrated that there were no hotels and restaurants in the Medina itself that catered to people like me, right? I was a young professional. I wasn't a backpacker, but I also wasn't wealthy. And at that time in Fez, you could either stay in kind of dirty backpacker hostels and eat street food every day, or you had to spend hundreds of dollars a night to stay in some like a really fancy hotel that served like international cuisine, or they served like Moroccan food that you could find on the street, but for like 10 times the price. And Fez is this incredible cultural asset, this beautiful UNESCO World Heritage Site, but you could only really experience it on one, either end of the spectrum, like budget spectrum, either like super cheap or super expensive. And so there were no places for people like me who wanted a really, unique and real cultural experience, but didn't have the money to spend all that. And I wanted more comfort than a bunk bed in a hostel. And, but I didn't want to spend $400 a night, especially as a young single woman. So my idea was not in any way innovative, like at all. I mean, people have been going to hotels for centuries. This is not new. And I didn't go to Fez looking for a business opportunity. I already had a job. So it was really just, I was annoyed at something. It bothered me and I wanted to fix it. And I think this is something that discourages a lot of potential entrepreneurs. All the jargon about ecosystem and accelerator and startup finance and incubators and hubs and business models and the big idea. I think that can be really intimidating sometimes, and it loses sight of the very simple human fact that an entrepreneur is really just a human being trying to solve a problem, trying to offer a product or service that they feel will add value. It's not just the big idea. It's not just finding finance. Really, what makes an entrepreneur is a mindset. And I'm going to very briefly share one slide with you all, which is that's not what I wanted to share. 1 second. Let's try that again. This is the European Union Entrepreneurial Competency Framework. And I think this is one of the best kind of summaries of all the things people, all the skills and knowledge and attitudes and behaviors that people need to be successful entrepreneurs. And you can see on this slide that they've divided it into kind of 3 sections. So you have ideas and opportunities, resources, and into action. And a really successful entrepreneur needs to have skills and competencies in every one of those 3 categories. And then, of course, you can see that it's kind of like a flower. Each color of the flower is sort of broken down into sub-competencies and, spotting opportunities, creativity, self-awareness. And I think, it's interesting, under resources, self-awareness is one of those. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because when people think about resources, they need to start a business, they think about money or, a physical space. But as an entrepreneur, you are probably one of your biggest assets, and knowing what you're good at and what you're not good at is really fundamental. And then into action, taking initiative, learning through experience. These are all really, really important. But, there's a lot of discussion about how to develop these entrepreneurial competencies amongst youth in order to solve unemployment or contribute to sustainable development goals. But far too often, these types of entrepreneurial competencies are taught exclusively inside an entrepreneurship program, like for people who have already decided, I want to be an entrepreneur. But these competencies are really just 21st century skills. These are competencies that everyone should develop. Being able to work in a team, being able to be creative, to have really good communication skills, to understand ethical and sustainable living. These are critical for everyone. And it's really important to keep in mind that we're talking about competencies, not skills. And this is these 2 things get confused and the terms get used interchangeably, and they're not. A skill is something that can be learned. You can learn about financial literacy. You can learn to develop a business plan. You can develop communication skills. But a competency is actually a combination of skill, knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors. So kind of to go back to your original question, it's the attitudes and the behaviors, in my experience, that really make or break an entrepreneur. So from my experience, both my own, starting my own business, and also in all the programs where I've coached entrepreneurs or helped younger entrepreneurs kind of get started, I found there are kind of 5 domains, sort of those little leaves on that competency framework that, in my experience, are super, super fundamental and determine if a person should be an entrepreneur and how successful they'll be if they do decide to pursue that. And the first is taking initiative. Like, lots of us know people who are constantly coming up with great ideas and plans to do this and that, and wouldn't it be great? But then those things never really they don't really move forward. They never take shape. They're just constantly ideas. And having an idea is great and it's important, but unless you take action to actually make that a reality, you're a dreamer. You're not an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is someone who can take a dream or a concept and actually make it physical, make it tangible, and bring it into life in reality. And that takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of research. You need to establish, like, is the problem you're trying to solve, is it worth solving? Because I come up with lots of ideas, and they're, some of them are pretty stupid, and they solve a problem that's really only a problem for me and not for anyone else. Are you solving the problem in a unique way or in a compelling way? And are people willing to pay you for the solution you've developed? And if they are, how much are they willing to pay? So there's a lot of work you have to do in that sort of taking initiative step. But it also, like, taking initiative really means not waiting around for people, for the timing to be perfect, for the opportunity to make your thing real, to kind of fall into your lap. And it also means, like, not blaming all the obstacles in your path. Like, your family isn't supportive maybe, or the government policies that support entrepreneurs aren't really very good or very, clear, or maybe banks are unwilling to lend to you. Those are realities. Entrepreneurs go through that. And yeah, they're harder for some entrepreneurs than for others. Women entrepreneurs often have a harder time getting finance than males. That's a reality. And that's rough. But it's how you navigate the obstacles in your path that differentiates an entrepreneur from a dreamer. And then sometimes along that path, while you're trying to make this concept you have into a reality, you realize that either the idea just kind of doesn't work, or it doesn't work the way you thought it would. And that brings us kind of to the next, like the second really important competency to have as an entrepreneur: flexibility. So flexibility is critical to the success of an entrepreneur at literally every step of the way, from developing your idea, your concept, to managing a huge corporation. So like, if you have a fixed idea about the type of product you want to offer, or the type of service you want to offer, or even just the way you want to manage your business, if your idea is really fixed in stone, you're probably going to miss opportunities. You're not going to be open to new ideas. You might risk ignoring information or feedback from people around you, from the market, that might point you in a better direction. You won't be able to adapt to changes in the market as they happen, and the markets are always changing. And so it's really important to be flexible. And one of my favorite examples of like a very flexible person who pivoted, changed their direction in the middle of their kind of career, and came up with a really fantastic idea is the story of a Danish farmer. So in Denmark, back in the early 1900s, he and his family for generations had had a carpentry shop where they made like doors and windows for barns, just mostly for the people in their area. But then when the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, people couldn't afford to either build new barns or renovate the barns that they had. And so this, shop, this carpentry shop that had been in business for, 80 years, they had to fire all their laborers, and they didn't really know what to do. But the man who was in charge of it, he was like, well, I have this wood and I have the skill to work it. So instead of making these big, expensive things, I'm going to make children's toys, because they're small, they're easy to market, they're not too expensive, people can buy them. And then, so he started doing that. And after World War II ended and plastic started coming into the market, he realized that plastic was actually cheaper than wood. So he started making his little wooden toys out of colorful plastic, particularly his, they had little like building blocks. And so he started making these little plastic colored building blocks, which then became, I'm sure many of you can guess by now, Lego. So like one of the most well-known global children's toys company in the world started out as a man who made doors and windows for farms. But because he was attentive and he was flexible and he looked at where the market was going and he took the skill he had and channeled it in another direction, he and his family have, developed one of the most successful companies in the world. There's a small caveat here, though. So a little warning: it is possible to be too flexible. So if you're so flexible that you're sort of pursuing one idea and then coming back and pursuing another idea, and then maybe playing a little bit with this idea on the side, if you're constantly moving and constantly looking at different things, you probably aren't giving the time and attention you really need to your primary idea. And you get a little bit, it's easy to become sort of paralyzed by the complexity of all the possibilities and all the possible things you can do. And that makes you incapable of making taking decisive action, saying, I'm going to do this. So there's a balance that you need to strike between taking initiative and being flexible. And like even the founder of Lego, in his memoir, he wrote, I realized one day that if I was really going to make the toy business work, I had to let go of everything before. I had to let go of the family business. We gave it a new name. So even he recognized, like, it was good that he was flexible, but there came a point where to make that thing work, he had to let the rest go. Okay, so that's 3. 4, teamwork. Really important, working with others. No successful entrepreneur has ever gotten where they needed to go on their own. Not Elon Musk, not, Richard Branson. No one has ever done it. It takes a team. And sure, there's usually one person who's kind of the face of it, but it's a team effort. So if you start your kind of exploration of entrepreneurship with a really honest assessment of your strengths and your weaknesses, you'll probably find, like, oh, maybe I'm really good at thinking creatively, but I'm not very good at managing finances. Or maybe I'm never very good at, making decisions definitively, and I need someone to kind of be a sounding board. And, that's a really good way of sort of identifying the types of people you might want to bring in to work with you to help you navigate some of these problems. But teamwork, it's not just about solving problems together. Like, someone else can bring a new perspective on your idea or your product that is really going to change it from something that's not going to work to something that's fantastic. And again, great story of this man who was working in a big manufacturing company called 3M. He was given the task of developing a really strong adhesive, like something that's like for like a industrial process, a really strong glue. And he developed something and it was terrible and it didn't work at all. It was like the weakest glue. Like, it would stick to things, but then would pull away really easily. So he was like, oh, this is a total failure. But whatever, he developed the thing and he just went on to another project, still with his company. And everybody said, oh, well, never mind. And then a few years later, he was talking to someone else in his company. And that person had a task that they were struggling with. They had to come up with a bookmark that stuck to paper, but could pull away without damaging the page. And so these two people together, the guy was like, hey, I've got glue that sticks, but not really. And they came together and they created Post-it notes, sticky notes. And again, so that's a way where a team actually turned a failure into a huge success. So that's 3. Or 4 is perseverance. And I'm going to kind of quickly go through this because we're coming up on 5 o'clock for you in Beirut. I'm not going to lie. Being an entrepreneur is hard. After the big idea is done, you've got the business set up, there is a lot of really hard, unglamorous work. It's work. And people like to romanticize being an entrepreneur as saying, like, oh, you set your own schedules and it must be so nice to work for yourself. Yeah, but you don't ever get a sick day. You don't ever get time off if business is really working well. And in my case, because I was in hospitality, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, all the big holidays, when everybody else is out having fun, I'm working because I'm in hospitality. I have a restaurant. They're coming to me to enjoy their holiday, but I don't get the holiday. So there's, you need to really think about what it's going to take from you personally to manage a business, where your priorities are. If it's your family and spending a lot of time with your family, like, it can be really hard to be an entrepreneur, and it takes a lot of just plain stubbornness. And I'm going to put my head down and do it, even when it's hard, even when it's not fun or glamorous. Like, I'm just going to do this. And the last thing 5, risk, coping with risk and the unknown. It gets really hard to say that any one of these 5 things is more important than another one, but this one's really fundamental. If you're the type of person that likes routine, that you feel safe when you have regular income coming in and you know what's expected of you day to day from your professional life, if you're someone that doesn't like to take chances on things that might not work, or if you don't like learning new things quickly all the time, if you have a comfort zone that is really well defined and you don't like working outside of that, you're probably not cut out to be an entrepreneur. And that's not a bad thing, but it's better to know it now than later on. Again, from my experience and the experience I've shared with others, being an entrepreneur every day brings a new challenge. It's often something that needs immediate action, and it's often something that is way outside your sphere of knowledge and skill. And you just have to learn something totally new that you never expected really fast and to be able to move forward. And then, of course, risk. There's always the risk that your business just won't work and all your time and money and effort is lost. And yeah, I'm sure you learned good lessons along the way and all that, but valuable lessons and rich experiences, they don't put food on your table and they don't pay the bills. So that's something you need to really consider. Do you have family commitments? You need to, are you the main, provider for your family? If so, being an entrepreneur can be scarier than it might be for someone else. But if you've got all of these competencies, except for the risk, you've got the other four: flexibility, initiative, teamwork, perseverance, you might be a really good entrepreneur. So that's someone who actually develops new concepts and products within a company that they already work for. And this is a really valuable thing that employers look for. They're looking for people in their company to innovate and to bring new ideas. And so this is something also to consider. You can be entrepreneurial within an employment situation that takes away some of that risk, which can be really helpful.